Hello everybody, welcome to another R video. Today we're going to be doing an introduction to ggplot2. So as a bit of a quick reminder, in the last video we talked about how within a current R session there is already these base R functions, and some of these base R functions include functionality to do plotting. Now today we're going to be using ggplot2, and ggplot2 is a graphing library that allows us to make a bit of a nicer plots. And in order to do this, we have to load in tidyverse. So as a reminder, you have to first install tidyverse, and then to use tidyverse inside your current R session, you have to run library tidyverse. And once you do that within your current R session, you'll be able to use the tidyverse functions, which includes the ggplot2 functions. So let's create our first ggplot together. So in this section, we're going to be recreating this plot here. Now I know this plot looks very complex, but we will break it down together. Now, when we're thinking about ggplot, the way that I like to think about it is using this painting analogy. So we can think of using ggplot like painting a painting, except that instead of paint, we are adding data. Now, I know this sounds a bit weird. Let's talk about what I mean by this. Now, just first, again, I know it's another reminder, but please make sure you've included tidyverse, otherwise this code will not work. Okay. So the first thing we need to do as part of this painting analogy is we need to create a canvas in which we're going to add our data. So to do that, we write down here just ggplot with brackets, and if you were to run this code, you would see a grey box appear, and we can think about that as the canvas which we're going to add our data. What's the next thing we want to do? Well, now we want to add the data that we're going to be painting. So we can see that here in the code, I've now specified iris. Iris is our data set. And this thing here, AES, that stands for aesthetics. And inside these brackets, we specify the data that we're going to plot. So from the iris data set on the x-axis, we're going to plot the sepal length data. And on the y-axis, we're going to plot the sepal width data. And we can see that when we run this, we now have our sepal width and our sepal length axes added onto our painting canvas. Okay, what do we want to do next? So the next thing we want to do is we want to create a scatter plot. So how do we do that? Well, we're going to just add this to our painting. So here we've got our ggplot, and we're literally just doing plus geom point. And again, you can think about this as we're adding another layer onto our painting. Now, let's add some color. So to do this, we have to do one little thing. Inside our aesthetics, we add this extra parameter, color equals species, and when we run this, it tells ggplot, okay, we want to change the color of the points to be based on species, and does all of it for us. Now, if we look at the previous slide, you would see, let's go back really quick, these axis labels, they're pretty clear, but it's a bit annoying that it's like got a dot there. So why don't we change that? Well, again, we just add another layer. So we go plus labs, okay, and now we can specify our X label, sepal length, and our Y label, sepal width. So you can see we keep adding new layers. Okay, let's say we want to add a title as well. Well, inside of our labs, now we just add a title, and it appears up the top. Lastly, let's just make this look a little bit nicer. We can add another layer, which is this theme underscore BW, which is black-white, and it just makes the plot look a little bit cleaner. So that's how ggplot works. We keep building up these layers, and it starts to build up what our plot looks like. In the next section, we'll have a look at how we can make some box plots together. So the first thing we need to do before we can create our box plots is we need to make a new Quarto document. This is where we're going to put the code for our box plots. Let's call this document box plots. Okay. I'm also going to change the source view. I just personally prefer that. And I'm going to delete everything down here. We just want to make sure that we keep our YAML intact. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to create a new R chunk, and we need to load in tidyverse because remember, ggplot2 requires that tidyverse has been loaded in. So we go library tidyverse, and then we can run this chunk, and we can see the messages. This tells us that tidyverse has loaded in. Now we're going to create another R chunk, and this chunk is going to contain the code for the box plot. So let's do this in stages again, illustrating the artist analogy. the painting analogy. So the first thing we want to do is we want to create a ggplot. So we can write ggplot like this. And if I run the code, we can see we get our grey background. Okay, this is a good first step. Now we need to specify the data that we're going to plot. So just like last time, we're going to be using the iris data set. And then we need to use AES to specify the aesthetics, which is the data that we're going to plot. So we'll make our x-axis this time petal length. And on our y-axis, we're going to put species. Now, species is a categorical variable, and we'll talk more about that soon. But let's see what happens when we run this. Okay, we can see that our axes have now filled in, so we've added these to our painting. What do we want to add next? Well, now we want to add box plots. So to do that, we go plus geom box plot. And if I press play, we can see that we've now added our box plots correctly. Now, it would be cool if each of these different species box plots was a different color. And to do that, we can just go inside our aesthetics brackets and we can just add fill equals species. And this tells ggplot that we want each of these different species to be a different color. And so now we've got different colors. Similar to before, this petal.length, I would prefer to say petal space length. So we can add a X label. So we go labs X equals petal length. Let's also add a title whilst we're here. So we can say petal length. Or we can maybe see the petal length for different species. Something like that. Okay, and if we run this again, we can see this information has now been added. And let's add the black-white theme again, just to get rid of this kind of grey box. And we can just add it. So this is how to create a box plot in ggplot. You can see that once you start to get the hang of it, it's actually not too difficult. Sometimes I can see some really difficult plots and I can be like, how am I going to do this? Really, just think about it again like a painting. We just want to put layers and we keep building these layers up. And once you think about it like this, you'll be mastering ggplot in no time.